We're up to nearly 50 lawsuits that Judicial Watch has filed against the deep state to figure out the conspiracy against President Trump and the rule of law in our republic. Because it's not about President Trump. Obviously it is personally, because they don't think President Trump should be protected by the rule of law, but it's about our republic. Whether or not our government officials are going to rise or fall based on abuses of power and law by bureaucrats and appointees and some elected other officials. And they're willing to tear through the Constitution to get their political enemies. That's the issue here. That is the greatest corruption scandal of all time. You see this with the FBI spying on President Trump, the Trump campaign, and President Trump. But it's the willingness to cast aside the rule of law to target the President of the United States. It's really unprecedented in American history. So people have had, so I say we have got 50 lawsuits, 10 of which at least actually are focused on the Mueller investigation. So people say, let's investigate the investigators. Let's not forget that the Mueller investigation is an investigation that needs investigating. And to that end, we filed a lawsuit against the FBI for records of a meeting set up by Andrew Weissman, the number 2 under Mueller. Anti-Trump activist is uncovered by Judicial Watch. Pro-Hillary Clinton activist as uncovered by the Wall Street Journal. You had the senior Justice Department official, I think he was top guy in the criminal division at the time. He went to Hillary Clinton's election night party in New York. He sent an email praising Sally Yates, the anti-Trump acting attorney general, the Obama holdover, praising her for thwarting the president's initial travel ban, or trying to, by refusing to defend it in court, a lawless and unethical act. This man was number 2 in Mueller's operation. He was also involved in this anti-Trump effort even before he was part of Mueller's operation. He met up with AP reporters to talk about Paul Manafort. He became known, quote, as the architect of the case against Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort, he probably committed tax fraud and did other things inappropriately. Whether he's guilty or innocent, he would never have been faced with criminal charges but for his relationship to President Trump. The federal charges against him were vindictive, had nothing to do with the rule of law. Now, I understand they resulted in his admitting to violations of the rule of law. But that doesn't mean they were brought to vindicate the rule of law. They were brought to try to destroy Donald Trump by trying to get his campaign chairman to turn. With a piling on of federal charges that would have seen him go to jail for dozens of years. So part of that effort included collaborating with the Associated Press, the AP, to get dirt on Manafort. And there was an infamous meeting that took place in April 11th, 2017. This is before Mueller was appointed, just over a month before Mueller was appointed, where DOJ and FBI officials, this meeting arranged by Weissman, met with 4 Associated Press reporters. And at a hearing in June 2017, a special agent testified the FBI may have conducted a May 17th, 2017 raid of a storage locker that Manafort was renting based on a tip from the AP reporters. He said the purpose of the meeting was for the DOJ and the FBI to obtain information from the AP. I think it's very interesting to know that Andrew Weissman and others at the DOJ and the FBI were colluding with the media to try to get President Trump's former top campaign official. And rather than comply with the Freedom of Information Act about this meeting, to give us documents about this meeting, they've been holding up the records. So this DOJ, the FBI and DOJ, it's kind of complicated. When you want records from the FBI, you have to sue its parent agency, in this case, the Department of Justice, are refusing to comply with FOIA law. If you refuse to comply with the law, we know what happens to you, right? But DOJ regularly refuses to comply with law, and we have to sue them in federal court. And then still we have to wait. But there are results that occur as a result of our getting documents out. There is a story out last week in The Hill, reported by John Solomon, that Mark Meadows, the Republican head of the House Freedom Caucus, one of the tough investigators on the House side investigating Spygate. He had Devin Nunes, Jim Jordan, Mark Gates, obviously Mark Meadows. He referred to the Justice Department a potential prosecution issue related to Nellie Ohr, who testified she hadn't talked to anyone about Fusion GPS, essentially. But Judicial Watch documents uncovered that she was in regular communication with the Department of Justice about Russia and Fusion GPS. Judicial Watch's document shows that Nellie Ohr married to Bruce Ohr, the Department of Justice official. Nellie worked for Fusion GPS, was in regular communication with Justice Department officials on Russia Gate, issues not only related to Trump, but to others. So much so, she may as well have had a desk at the Justice Department. So what happened is Meadows looks at our documents, compares and contrasts her regular communications with the Justice Department about Russia with her denials that she had communications with anyone about this issue, and said, Justice Department, you need to investigate her. But Judicial Watch hasn't stopped. So there's a criminal referral as a result of Judicial Watch getting documents out and educating Congress about what went on. Judicial Watch found, according to new documents, I think it was part of the same lawsuit that found the initial batch of documents, that Bruce Ohr had ethics concerns. You think? Tied to his Russia testimony. He wrote an ethics lawyer in The Hill in the judiciary, in the Justice Department. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me this morning. As requested, here's a short description of my question. As you may have heard, the Senate Intelligence Committee and House Intelligence Committee requested to interview me in connection with their investigations of possible Russian interference in the 2016 elections. Shortly after receiving the Senate request, a series of stories broke in the press about my alleged connections to Chris Steele. Alleged he had 60 communications with the guy. How many people do you have 60 communications with? Are those connections alleged? The author of the so-called Trump dossier, and then something's redacted. My question has to do with redacted. Are there any guidelines for redacted in order to satisfy any possible ethics concerns? And then the response is, can you obtain redacted? So we don't know what went on, but obviously there were ethics issues there. I mean, this guy Ohr, who as I may have told you before, we knew a little bit from prior legal work we had done for another Judicial Watch client. Christopher Steele is paid by the FBI through much of 2016. Judicial Watch and Judicial Watch alone uncovered that there were 11 payments to Christopher Steele by the FBI at the same time the Clinton DNC operation is paying Christopher Steele to dig up dirt on then candidate Trump. But he starts leaking. The FBI gets wind of this leak, and even that was too much for them, so they cut him off as a confidential human source. But instead, they used Bruce Ohr, whose wife worked with Christopher Steele through Fusion GPS, to communicate with Steele and get information back from them. So they cut him off as a source, but then improperly used Bruce Ohr, who was conflicted up the wazoo, to get material from Christopher Steele. And he has a series of communications, and he, at one point, and this is one of the documents, or series of documents the president should declassify or release as quickly as he can, he's interviewed 11 or 12 times by the FBI as a witness because of the communications with Steele. When did it occur to Bruce Ohr that maybe the fifth time he was interviewed by the FBI, that maybe I shouldn't be a witness in this investigation given my conflicts of interest? I would hope he would have ethics concerns. But of course, it only occurred to him that there were ethics issues, and my guess is it was representation issues, legal representation issues about which lawyers he could use. only because he was having to testify about this misconduct to the Senate. No problem having his wife essentially run his organized crime operation or become an employee or a volunteer for his organized crime operation out of the Justice Department while working for the Hillary Clinton camp. Unbelievable. But again, it's Judicial Watch filing the lawsuits and getting results. Bruce Ohr, again, a new lawsuit. We sued the Justice Department for communications between anti-Trumper Peter Strzok and Bruce Ohr. We asked for the communications. It said there are none, but it turns out they were in communication. So you can bet there were meetings, and we can't believe there are no records. We know that Strzok was deeply involved in both running the Hillary email investigation and the FBI Russiagate investigation. It's doubtful that Ohr's meetings with Strzok over a matter of national importance happened without a scrap of communication. So we want the documents. Another FOIA lawsuit by Judicial Watch. So as these fraudulent subpoenas are issued against Donald Trump Jr., as the Attorney General of the United States is harassed and smeared by the House Judiciary Committee, threatened with impeachment and removal, Judicial Watch is doing the basic investigations about Spygate, about the real corruption that Congress refuses to grapple with. The media is only, to the degree it reports on it, like the New York Times did it, it's written as a favor for those that leaked it to them from the deep state that's trying to get ahead of the story. I'm talking about the Spygate revelations of the FBI spying on President Trump that was released. And it's only Judicial Watch doing the basic investigations and litigation to get this information. I mean, we're happy to do the work. Don't get me wrong. That's why we're here. But isn't it outrageous that we're the ones doing it? And we're getting results. It's not just talking and complaining. The litigation results in revelations about government misconduct that educates you about the way your government operates and what your government's up to.